Good morning. Today, December 13th, I believe that it is the third day of Hanukkah. So happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends. This is the Sacred Journey of Life, Spiritual Center and Healing Order, welcoming you today to a magical voyage into another thought-provoking, high hope message supported and sent to you from the teachers who think it's appropriate to begin this conversation now and as we're looking into our 2021. So, if you don't know me, my name is Michelle Sailing, and I'm a teacher, a healer, a channeling medium, and right now operate and act as the spiritual director for this Sacred Journey of Life, Spiritual Center and Healing Order. To get ourselves oriented, first, if you are using your phone, if you would just turn off any noises that come with your phone so it doesn't disturb your thought provoking attention. I'd appreciate that. And I also would like you to just center yourself in a peaceful place, doors closed, and breathe. Just breathe to center yourself. So we're bringing in the divine gold light through our crown chakra, moving it through our energy body, through all the four centers, all of the chakras, down to the ground, being grounded. And as we exhale, we want to exhale out any stress, any worries, any concerns, and clear. Just clear. Let's clear our lungs. Thank you. The opening prayer. There is a quiet light that shines in every heart. It draws no attention to itself, though it is always secretly there. It is what illuminates our minds to see beauty or desire to seek possibility and to have our hearts just love life. Without this subtle quickening, our days would be empty and wearisome, and no horizon would ever awaken our longing. Our passion for life is quietly sustained from somewhere in us that is wedded to the energy and excitement of life. This shy inner light is what enables us to recognize and receive our very presence here as blessing. We enter the world as strangers who all at once become heirs to a harvest of memory, spirit, and dream that has long preceded us and will now enfold, nourish, and sustain us. John O'Donohue, Benedictus. What's the lay of the land for today's message? I couldn't quite get it into my usual pace of saying the intention of the message, because there really is a passage today, and we're all going to end up in different places, I hope. So let me just set down some of those authors, heroes of mine that I used to take the lead the teachers gave me to have this message today be about our calling. Viktor Frankl. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her life. Three possible sources for meaning: in work, in love, and in courage during difficult times. Viktor Frankl, who's a very famous psychoanalyst who wrote the book The Meaning of Life, was a survivor of the Holocaust camps. And inside the camp, he located, fought for, and kept alive his calling. That circumstances didn't define him. Now, none of us are in that type of difficult time right now, but we are facing them. Your calling is the source of power, no matter which of those areas you would choose, and possibly choose all of them. Your calling can pervade all of them. We are each more than a paper sack. Each of us is made in the image of the divine. We are beings of divine authority. What reflects us is what we hold, chose, created as our calling with the blessing of the divine. Joseph Campbell, The Call to Adventure. When we quit thinking primarily about ourselves and our own self-preservation, we undergo a truly heroic transformation of consciousness. What each must seek in his or her life never was on land or sea. It is something out of his or her own unique potentiality for experience, something that never has been and never could have been experienced by anyone else. A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. The hero's journey always begins with the call. With the call. One way or another, a guide must come to say, look, you're in Sleepyland. Wake, come on a trip. There is a whole aspect of your consciousness, your being, that's not being touched. So you're at home here? Well, there's not enough of you here. And so it starts. Finding your calling? No, as one of the speakers, one of the authors whose words I'm going to use at the end of this to give you some practical and some shares from people who found their calling, he says it's fighting for your calling, fighting for what's wanted and needed. One can liken this fight to an arduous yet successful mountain climb. We are standing at the top of the mountain with a clear, unfettered view of the night's spectacular sky, reflecting the radiant light we are already. That radiant light we all embody, yet in which we darken with the unconscious threads of self-destruction, which tether us to rocky ground. Herein lies a choice. We can view and experience the multidimensional realms before us, or we can remain in the limited, oppressive land of three-dimensional reality. This three-dimensionality is three-dimensional reality, which says, and all that you see is all that there is. It is our choice. We all have the capacity and strength to shift our awareness. We only have to embrace the optimal cycle which is upon us. Kaim Potok from The Chosen. You, we, become aware all at once of staggering things, of astounding things, of world-shattering things when we choose to move on this multi-dimensional reality, this world of possibility of the mystic and the magical. States of revelation and the heart stirs. States of revelation and the heart stirs. And the head begins to heed to the stirrings of the future. Especially strong, it's especially strong, drawing us toward altered states and threshold awareness. This alignment is an incredible catalyst out of past conditioning into the power of conscious choice. Something inside you, me, is unfreezing. It's as if a part of you is coming back to life. It's subtle, it's sensitive, and it's inexplicable. This is a version of yourself that is both familiar and utterly known at the same time. It's the new high frequency human experience. And you, my friend, you are along for the ride. Now we'll get into some meat. We're going to get into some meat. From time immemorial, it has been one of the deepest longings of the human heart to strain against the erosion of one's life, to find a way of living and being that manages to find some stable ground within time, a place from where something eternal can be harvested from our disappearance. This is what all art strives for, the creation of living permanence. It is what we are secretly doing when we become parents, endeavoring to maintain our continuity, to go beyond our own ending. The harvesting of transience is what we are also attempting in choosing the form of life we live. When we arrive on Earth, we are provided with no map for the life journey. Only gradually, as our identity forms and we get an inkling of who we are, do possibilities begin to emerge that call us. It is one of the weightiest decisions to decide what to do with your life. The challenge is to find a way of life that will be in harmony with your gifts and needs. Behind each face, there is a unique world that no one else can see. This is the mystery of individuality. The shape of each soul is different. No one else feeds your life. No one else feels your life the way you do. No one else sees or hears the world as you do. The creation of the individual is a divine masterpiece. We were dreamed for a long time before we were born. Our souls, minds, and hearts fashioned in the divine imagination. Such care and attention went into the creation of each person. Such care and attention went into the creation of each person. You, me. Given the uniqueness of each of us, it should not be surprising that one of the greatest challenges is to inhabit our own individuality and to discover which life form best expresses it. The great law of life is be yourself. Though this axiom sounds simple, it is often a difficult task. To be yourself, you have to learn how to become you were dreamed to be. Each person has a unique destiny. To be born is to be chosen. There is something special that each of us has to do in the world. If someone else could do it, they would be here and not us. One of the fascinating questions is to decipher what one's destiny is. At the heart of each destiny is hidden a unique life calling. What is it you are called to do? In old-fashioned language, what is your vocation in life? For some people, the question of their calling is very difficult to decipher. For others, it follows from an early intuition and practically unfolds of its own accord. For some, it can be the singular and exclusive direction their life takes. For others, it can change and follow new directions. Again, people never seem to find what they are called to do. This can burden them with a continual restlessness and dissatisfaction. When you find what you are called to do, your life takes on a focus and purpose. You come into rhythm with the deepest and deepest longing of your heart. The notion of vocation is interesting and rich. It suggests that there is a special form of life that one is called to follow this way or another, to realize one's destiny. Following one's vocation ensures that what you choose to do finds itself in harmony with your inner nature. It also means that this is the optimum way to unfold and develop whatever gifts one has. A vocation does not clear before you a smooth path through difficulties. Having a sense of one's vocation does not in any way relieve one of the travail and turbulence of being human. Indeed, being true to one's vocation can often require a level of generosity and risk that will cause great suffering, far more often, far more often than could be thought. For more often than not, there is no surge of light to clarify direction. The light on, offered, is enough to guide, but only to the next step. The nature of the calling can change over time, taking a person down pathways never anticipated. The calling opens new territories within the heart. This in turn deepens the calling itself. The faces of the calling change. What at the beginning seems simple and clear can become ambivalent and complex as it unfolds. To develop a heart that is generous and equal to this complexity is the continual challenge of growth. This is the creative tension that dwells at the heart of vocation. One is urged and coaxed beyond the pale regions into rich territories of risk and promise. It is devastating to feel trapped in a form of life where you feel utterly misplaced and all your effort is labored. Everything you do is done against the grain. You take no joy or pleasure in what you do, and your heart is haunted by alternate lives you will never have. When you feel like this, it can make for a resentful and bitter life, a life where you are neither seen nor understood for much of the time, and your gifts remain locked away, never to emerge. It is clearly time to change what you are doing. Perhaps sacrifice the familiar in order to find your true calling. Such change can utterly transform your life. It is such a relief and joy to find the calling that expresses and incarnates your spirit. When you find that you are doing what you love, what you were brought here to do, it makes for a rich and contented life. You have come into rhythm with your longing. Your work and action emerge naturally. You don't have to force yourself. Your energy is immediate. Your passion is clear and creative. A new calling can open the door into the house of vision and belonging. You feel at home in your life, in your heart, and hearth at one. Being at one in love, in life, with your heart at hearth. Now, the notes I have now are from Dave Islay. Dave has written a book called Callings, The Purpose and Passion of Work. So this is like the practical point of view. And I think he also did this, a lot of the content I'm going to give you now in a TED Talk. And Dave says, you don't find your calling, you fight for it. And now here I will offer lessons from people who found their passion and sometimes late in life. Whether it was during a career aptitude test or in a heart-to-heart chat after getting laid off, chances are someone has talked to you about how to find your calling. It's one of those phrases people toss about, but I take issue with that, specifically the verb calling. Finding your calling, it's not passive, he says. When people have found their calling, they've made tough decisions and sacrifices in order to do the work they were meant to do. In other words, you don't just find your calling, you have to fight for it. And it's worth the fight. People who found their calling have a fire about them. They're the people who are dying to get up in the morning and go do their work. Over a decade of listening to many interviews as he prepared for his book, Dave Isay noticed that people often share their story of how they discovered their calling, and he's collected some of them. Below, I share with you 7 takeaways from the hard won fought to find the work you love. Your calling is at the intersection of a Venn diagram of 3 things: doing something you're good at, feeling appreciated, and believing your work is making people's lives better. When those 3 things line up, it's like lightning, Isay says. He doesn't suggest that a person has to be a surgeon saving lives to feel like they have a calling. Think of the diner waitress who talks to customers and makes them feel loved. How do you find this overlap? You have to shut out all of the chatter of what your friends are telling you to do, what your parents are telling you to do, what society is telling you to do, and just go to that quiet place inside where you know the truth. Your calling, he says, comes out of difficult experiences too. What lurks in that quiet place will be a defining experience, quite possibly a painful one. Isay points to an interview with a 24-year-old teacher. He was studying to be a doctor when his father was murdered. He realized that what he was really meant to do was be a teacher. He says that every time he walks into a classroom, his father is walking in with him. This theme of people turning their hardest experiences into a new path runs throughout his book. Having an experience that really shakes you and reminds you of your mortality can be a very clarifying event in people's lives. Oftentimes, it leads to changes. We spend a lot of time working, so it can really change your priority in terms of work life. Calling often takes courage and ruffles feathers. He talks about Wendell Scott, who became the first American NASCAR driver in 1952 and kept on driving despite threats against his life. From scientist Dorothy Warburton, who dealt with extreme sexism as she conducted research to break the stigma around miscarriage. From Brunel Copeland, who opened the first grocery store in the lower Ninth Ward after Hurricane Katrina because he wasn't about to let his old neighborhood spirit fade. Calling, says Isay, very often starts with taking a stand against status quo that simply isn't acceptable. Then dedicating your work, excuse me, then dedicating your work to changing it. It's a work ignited by hope, by love, or defiance, and stoked by purpose and persistence. Often other people will nudge you to a calling, he says. Sharon Long had worked odd jobs most of her life. Her daughter was going to college, and as the bursar was helping them with financial aid forms, she said quietly to herself, "I wish I could have gone to college." The bursar responded, "It's not too late." Sharon enrolled in an art program, and on her advisor's suggestion, took forensic anthropology as her science. The advisor suggested it for no other reason than he thought it was the easiest science course for the science requirement. But The minute she sat in that class, it was boom. This is what she was meant to do. Essay suggests and says further in his book and illustrates how calling, while very personal, is also relational. People bump you this way and that way, often without realizing it. When people find their callings, they want to honor those people who helped them get there. What comes after identifying your calling is what really matters. The old finding your calling phraseology makes it sound like it's a calling, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You find it and the story's over. But Essay stresses that your calling is an ongoing process. Understanding what your calling is, that's very different than the blood, sweat, and tears of actually doing it. Pursuing a calling may require going back to school or apprenticing. It may require starting a business. Often, it leads a person to a line of work that's in service of others. This book, he says, is basically a love letter to nurses, teachers, social workers, the people who don't often get celebrated for the work they do. Dave goes on to say age is irrelevant. He found his calling when he was 21 and interviewed a man who had been part of the Stonewall riots. The minute I hit record, I knew that being a journalist and interviewing people was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I feel very lucky that lightning struck when I was very young. But collecting stories for the book reminded him that a calling can be discovered at any age. This book includes an interview with someone who knew they wanted to be an NBA referee at age 15, and another who worked as an accountant for 30 years before discovering his passion for slicing logs. Doing the work you're meant to do is one of the most satisfying, remarkable experiences that a person can have. So never give up. Calling often doesn't come with a big paycheck. Another trend that occurs is that in some of these stories of these people who find their calling, they often involve leaving a high paying job for one that's lower paying, but more satisfying. The message we send to young people is that you want to do as little work as you can to make as much money as you can. That's the dream. That's the world's dream. But the wisdom is, as I see it in my archive of experience, is that there's another, much more rewarding dream of taking risks and working very hard to live with integrity. In the end, that's the lesson he took away from writing his book. There are no millionaires, no billionaires, no jillionaires, no celebrities, nobody with a big Twitter following, he says. Just stories that teach us a lot about lives fully lived. The experience that we're having in this pandemic now, as we see those people who are getting out of bed and leaving their families behind, and sometimes unable to even go home and be with or hug their children or sit at dinner with them, as these nurses and doctors and first responders are taking care of us. So finding your calling and living your calling, two different levels of accomplishment. I'd like to share with you my personal share when I discovered, when I could find words for my calling. So you know who I am and who I am for you. And I've only shared this with one very important person in my life before this. But I share it with you now because I know how much I am this. And I want to offer this to you. Though I am experiencing disparagement, I shall not be disparaged. Though I may experience the disappointment of not moving you into action, I will not still my heart or make apologies for my continued stand to have you lifted up into your light. I will not be unforgiving for the pain and loss your resistance cost me, but shall allow Spirit to fill me up again and again and again. I will draw you maps to the ocean of peace and contentment and place them in front of you lovingly and ongoingly. I allow myself to be a stepping stone on your sacred journey of life as I arise into my hero, trusting that love will be perpetuated everywhere for everyone I touch, and thus may I experience its glow, its sustenance to take me forward. The heavens then shall rain it down. That is who I shall be as teacher and healer. That, that, my friends, is my expression of my calling. And that was only discovered in April of 2018. So there may have been different actions, inconsistent actions, but there was no plan of action until I sat down and looked at that as I began to coach other people, be teacher, be healer. And I offer that to you. Sit down in a quiet place and tell yourself, inform yourself. Let your guides and guardian angels support you in this too, of who you are, and what you're up to. Organize it. Organize it. And actually, some of us, and I think many of us now, given the pandemic and given that everything else in the life we had created before was altered, definitely affected, perhaps this is the opportunity for you to take a look. Is this my calling? What is my calling? But be in that quiet space. Be in that quiet space. And I think you'll begin to hear I think you'll begin to hear and feel what the adventure has been for you and know that that's the adventure you want to move on with. That's the adventure. We have a great treat for you today. We have a song from Ronnie Weiss, but this is a song that Ronnie just wrote, and she's allowing me to offer it to you as part of our service today. So I thank you, Ronnie, for that. And then we'll hand the closing prayer.
The year was 2020, my vision it was not, and so I called the doctor to see just what he thought, and after my appointment, my eyes thoroughly checked. He said, I have an answer that you might not expect. Your left eye is much clearer, the right one has a haze, and with a slight adjustment, it might improve your gaze. So this is my prescription, it's something you can do. Let's try progressive lenses and modify the view. Well, he must be the expert, so I took that man's advice. I put my brand new glasses on, I blinked not once but twice. The world was full of color, it wasn't black and white, with oh so many shades of gray, a real surprise in sight. My eyes just opened wider, I couldn't help but stare. They've been so out of focus, not knowing what was there. But seeing is believing, and I began to find I had a new perspective and quite a different mind. Well, those optical illusions had really disappeared. I came out of the tunnel of darkness and of fear. Now I'm not wearing blinders or looking near or far, for I have found the true way to see things as they are. With crystal clear perception, I'm looking with my heart, 'cause those progressive lenses showed me that's the place to start. And as I'm moving forward, in hindsight I can see the year of 2020 has really set me free.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. I am honored by your listening. I offer you many, 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 many happy holiday preparation time as we get to create from nothing how we will celebrate this holiday now that most of us on restriction. But it is possible. It's possible. Create some magic. Watch some good movies. I'm getting ready to watch all of the Santa Claus movies with Tim Allen because I can watch them forever. So yes, his calling is to be Santa Claus. And I'm going to read something for you to end our day together. To live an intentional spiritual life, we have the responsibility to choose the myths that shape our life. Personally, I choose to believe in Santa Claus. He is wonderful and magical. He is wonderful and magical. And he remains for me a messenger of the true meaning of Christmas. Bring joy, friends. Bring joy. Celebration for this year's holiday. Thank you for being here. I love you. Namaste. While I'm stuck here before I end this, I want to remind you, your contributions are very much appreciated to cover the costs of phone imprinting and Facebook promotions and website writers and etc. And I'm sorry to say you haven't seen the website yet, but you will be. And I'm counting on it that in a few months you're going to see a very exciting YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the Sacred Journey of Life YouTube channel if you haven't. Our goal is to get to 100 subscribers ASAP. And please send your donations to Sacred Journey of Life 2020 at gmail.com. Much appreciated.